Good evening and welcome to this second session of our climate series of resilience talks and cafes. We had our first session last week with Andrew Ferroni on climate science, and this week we will talk about climate policy at the EU level. I'm very glad to welcome Ulriikka Aarnio. She is from the Climate Action Network Europe, where she is Senior Policy Coordinator. She focuses on international climate negotiations, and she manages CAN Europe's representation at the sessions of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. The Climate Action Network Europe is Europe's biggest NGO coalition fighting climate change. It has 170 member organizations in 38 European countries. I believe that for Luxembourg, the members of CAN Europe are ASTM Mouvement Écologique and Greenpeace Luxembourg. So this session is organized by CEL, the Luxembourg Transition Platform, in collaboration with Votum Klima. So Ulriikka, you have the floor.
Okay. So hi. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to have this chat with you. I will do a little presentation in the beginning, some maybe 15 minutes, and then we can have a discussion together on the what will be interesting, whatever you will find interesting then afterwards. So I will share my screen. How to do that? Like this. Yeah, is it now? It's there. Okay, good. And I will do even this. It's good. Yeah. Okay. So yes, like already mentioned before, we're the biggest network, and we have a lot of members and member organizations. So we also have. Is it 8 o'clock? There's still this, no, it shouldn't be. So sorry, there's some shouting, but I can't close the window. It's really hot here upstairs. So we have lots of member organizations, but we also have big NGO networks are members like Greenpeace, WWF, Friends of the Earth, etc. So we're very big. We have a lot of environment and conservation NGOs, but in the recent years, we have more and more development NGOs also. Sorry. And how we work. So I have made a little nice graph for you. We are the CAN Europe Secretariat. We are currently some 25 people. We are mainly based in Brussels. We have also people in Berlin, Warsaw, Istanbul, and every now and then other parts of Europe as well. But most of us are based in Brussels, and we work. We coordinate the work from here. Our work, of course, we are just the secretariat, so we coordinate positions, but our positions are made together with the members, and also the issues that we want to work on are usually the issues that are then defined by the network together, that what we find priorities. Of course, we need to follow the European agenda a little bit, because we want to also impact the legislation and the policies that are on the table. So we are in Brussels. We often talk to the Commission, because they are the ones in Europe, in the EU, who have the right for initiative, and they prepare all the legislation. So so this is very key piece of our work, so that we know what is coming, and we are able to also have our say at early on. Most of the climate and energy files that we work on, they are co-decision normal legislative files, and they are decided together with the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers. So, for example, climate change issues usually need to be done by the environment ministers together with the European Parliament. Some of the issues are, of course, then done on the European leaders level. for example, all European climate targets so far have been decided by the heads of state and government, so that the net zero target for 2050, but also our current target that is at least minus 40% from 1990 levels by 2030. This has first been decided by the heads of state, and then it has been decided by the council and the parliament, and then we have done the implementing legislation. The correct way, of course, to do climate legislation would be the normal legislative procedure, but these kinds of things, going climate neutral by 2050, reducing emissions X% by 2030, they are seen so big decisions that it has been seen necessary to take it to the highest level and make sure that everyone is a part of the agreement. The heads of state, when they make decisions, they always do it unanimously. There's no voting. There's no voting in the European Council. That is also the council that meets tomorrow. But when there's a normal legislative procedure on issues, then there is a qualified majority voting, and that doesn't need unanimity, and more ambitious positions might get passed if we consider that we have some laggard countries in Europe as well. So we work a lot in Brussels. We talk to the European Parliament, we talk to the Commission, we also talk to the ministers, but usually the advocacy work to the national level goes via our members. This is, of course, then also more impactful. Then none of you need to be reminded about our challenge, but just to put this a little bit in the context of also what matters, why we have chosen such policy decisions, is that we are very much short of time. This is my favorite way of describing what is our climate change challenge, because CO2, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, and particularly CO2 accumulates in the atmosphere for a very, very long time. So we annually emit CO2 about 40 gigatons per year, and that adds up. So that the bathtub, if you think, is getting full. So you see this whole circle here, it represents the IPCC's assessment of what is a carbon budget, how much additional CO2 the atmosphere can take if we want to have a 66% likelihood for staying at 1.5 degrees extra warming, and that is getting very tight now. So between 1870 and 1811, we used almost 2,000 gigatons, and we have been emitting with a very speeding rate annual emissions every year. As you can see, it took many years to come to eat 3/4 of the budget. Then it took only 8 years to do 320 gigatons, and now we have only 240 gigatons available to have to stay within the carbon budget that would give us 66% likelihood for 1.5, and we do it. We eat the darker gray part 40 gigatons a year. So you can yourself add up. It doesn't. It takes 5-6 years, and this is gone. Of course, so therefore, everything we do, we want to we want to do it as fast as possible. The next years matter. This year matters. Next year matter. The next 5 years matter. The next 10 years matter. So, and then if we continue with the increasing trend, then we are too late. We are already, of course, too late. Paris Agreement, you know, we have very good targets from 5 years ago from Paris. So we have a decision to pursue efforts to keep temperature rise to 1.5. We have, these are the three global goals that we have. We have so 1.5 degrees, adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change and foster resilience. And this is this third one is the one that is less discussed, but very, very important. And it's the one that hasn't really been, we haven't really talked about how to really operationalize it. So we have for the 2 degree, for the 1.5 degrees for the warming goal, we have the tools how to do that. We have same for adaptation. We are really working on that. But the one that has been left at the UNFCCC context still is a bit. The last one, the how to make finance flows consistent. And this means all financial flows, and it is very relevant at the moment because of all this recovery money that will be floating in the next months and years. So this is also a reminder that our governments actually have committed, our governments, and also this means also for all the private finance flows should be directed towards low greenhouse gas and resilient pathways. I already mentioned, and you also know this, I'm sure that last December, the European leaders finally endorsed the objective of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. And we can discuss later what this then means. This means that emissions and removals need to be balanced at zero. And this is, of course, zero. It's extremely clear. It's much better than saying that we need to reduce emissions 95% by 1990 levels. So when you have the zero, it really shows where you need to go. It talks to every citizen. It talks to every sector, and it has a lot of kind of long-term mental impact that we can already see. Then and it is really nice. But what is really then important in this, that we start to then unpack it and roll it back to this year and today and tomorrow, what we need to do now to get there. Can Europe's position, of course, is earlier for Europe. We are in the position that we would need to reduce climate neutrality latest by 2040. So, but we have worked on the net zero target, of course, as well. But for the last 5 years, can Europe's main goal has been to increase climate action in the next decade. So we have been campaigning for. We already started this before Paris, that the EU's current minus 40% top level target needs to be increased, and we are now calling for at least minus 65% from 1990 levels. So I will tell you a little bit more. There's now luckily, with a new commission a year ago, we got a new commission with a new really quite exciting new agenda. So we had advanced quite a lot at the European level on the net zero 2050 discussion. So Commission had already proposed that, and many countries were already supporting it. So the European Parliament, of course, also under a heavy lobbying from Can Europe and Can Europe members, made the revision of the 2030 target and increasing our 2030 target really a key issue when the European Parliament was to adopt or was to endorse the new Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, whom you all know, and then later on the whole Commission. So it really, a year ago, it really became the major topic when talking about the new Commission. And this had a big impact also on them formulating the agenda, the Commission agenda for the next 5 years. So what is called the major the main theme of the Commission for the next 5 years. This is not the word I was looking for, but it is the European Green Deal. It's Europe's next growth strategy, and now, of course, our recovery strategy. But it's really for the first time we have climate and environment protection and nature's resilience, understanding of ecosystems. They are at the very heart of what the Commission has been doing, and this is really a huge change since the last Commission. So there's so far, at least on the words level, on the narrative level, it is all very good, but it of course then goes down to how to implement it. So then before Christmas last year, a couple of months after the adoption of the Commission, they released this big document that outlines their vision, Europe's vision for the next 5 years, and this is the European Green Deal. And it's not only about climate, it's also about biodiversity, nature conservation, and cutting down pollution and plastics. It's about air quality. It talks to all our environmental challenges. It is really, I would even say that it is a very nice and inspiring paper, but obviously it needs to be then well implemented. And what I think that is really nice about it is that for the first time, climate and environment are seen as a very broad issues that cut across all sectors, that it is understood that they are not separate items that we need to address in silos, but it is everywhere. And there seems to be a little bit of understanding that also our economic activities and everything we do are dependent on a healthy climate and environment. So for us at Can Europe, of course, we are focusing on the climate action, even though, of course, we also understand that everything is interconnected. So for us, the first document that came out was the proposal for the climate law. This is an instrument that is now with the Environment Ministers Council and in the European Parliament, and this is to inscribe the climate neutrality target, 2050 target, into legislation. This legislation would be binding at the European level, and that would then make it binding for Europe to achieve. So now in the European Parliament, I was told that this is now the members of the Parliament can make then their own amendments to the legislation, and I heard that there would be 800 pages of amendments, which would be one of the record amount of amendments ever. And the one that is most interesting for us is that the rapporteur of the file herself, Swedish Jutta Gutteland, proposed a minus 65% for 2030. So we have now, by a very central player in the climate law legislation, the rapporteur of the file herself has presented an amendment, a target that would be in line also with our position, and hopefully also a little bit with what the EU needs to do to do their fair share for 1.5 compliant pathway. And so this is happening in the Parliament and in the Environment Council, and we will have the votes now right after summer, and maybe there's already some sort of an agreement before the end of the year. What does the 2030 target look like from their point of view? This was not the Commission's proposal, the idea, because I told you already before that these 2030 targets and also the 2050 target was first decided on the heads of state and government level. So they would also want to have the EU heads of state and government to discuss the 2030 target before we increase it. So there's a commitment from the new Commission to increase it. There's a commitment from the Council to increase it. There's a call from the Parliament to increase it. But now the question is to what number. So Commission is now doing their analysis that they will come out in September, and they are only analyzing pathways to minus 50% or 55%, not 65 like the Parliament wants and the NGOs want. So the Commission will present this analysis in the autumn, and then it was the idea that the EU heads of state will then take a look at that and see what could be our 2030 climate target. But there's now this parallel process with the climate law that also has that element, even though it was not in the Commission's original proposal. So we have now plenty of avenues to work on the 2030 target. Then, so these are all come from the European Green Deal. So then they will, of course, once we have increased the target, we need to then deal with the legislation that actually implements it. These are the three pillars of the European climate policy: are emissions trading scheme, ETS, effort sharing. These are the sectors that are outside emissions trading, and then LULUCF, land use change and forestry. That is then mainly the forest management emissions and removals. Mainly removals. And then we will have a revision of CO2 in cars. There's also a strategy to go towards net zero mobility. And then one of the issues that has been very much asked to be included into Europe's climate policy is border adjustment for sectors that are seen to be more vulnerable because EU has these strict standards compared to other economies. For example, steel and cement and some chemicals. There are a lot of sectors who now get free allocation, so they don't need to pay for their pollution permits under the ETS. And one of the things that has been asked is that we also need to have a border tax for steel and cement coming out of our borders. But these two things don't go together, that we would have free allocation, that the pollution permits would be given for free, and at the same time there would be a border tax. So we see this also as a bit of a possibility to get rid of the free allocation that we, of course, don't like at all. So we are following this discussion with interest, but we haven't taken a much active role in it. Then the Green Deal also have a really nice words on biodiversity. There's a new biodiversity strategy that just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's also a really nice document, but then I have to always say that it goes down then to the implementation. There's a forest strategy coming, and then also next year a conservation law that could be also very interesting for ecosystems protection, but also for land's ability to take in more carbon. There's parts on resilience and adaptation. There's a new adaptation strategy that is also now coming out, and sustainable finance, also timely, very relevant. There's a plan to phase out coal, take in more renewables. There's also a relevant legislation also that is then needed to reach EU's updated 2030 target, will also then come to out from the Commission next year. And we have a new circular economy strategy. We have a farm to fork on and the common agriculture also. We were waiting for the farm to fork strategy to really talk about meat consumption. It is very shy on that, but hopefully that will be improved in the legislative process when it comes to it. And there's also an element of EU wanting to be a global leader and have a Green Deal also to have an external dimension, especially toward Africa. And there's also a citizens' engagement element, seeing that this cannot be done without the support of citizens. First of all, approval of the citizens, but also action by the citizens. And one of those is, I don't know why I don't have the name here now, but something I can't remember. Anyways, there's a little citizens call at the moment where we are probably not taking part in that. We argue that we would rather join and have our say on the real legislation than have a say on a citizens discussion board that is not really very centrally linked to any of the real action that will happen. So our main goal, I go very quickly this because I already talked about it. So in Paris, countries acknowledge that their targets are not adequate to staying below 2 degrees, nor let alone 1.5. And there was an agreement that by 2020, countries would put in new updated NDCs. So now with the COVID crisis, this year's COP has been pushed forward for another year. So there's a risk that some countries might consider that also the deadline has moved, but it is this year, and we are working for the EU at least to finalize this year, and they have also committed to climate law in co-decision, and then the target plan from the Commission in September, and all this when we get to the decisions, it runs parallel to the multi-annual financial framework and the recovery package negotiations. And these are, whenever you try to get something on climate in Europe from all member states, there's also very much a finance element is involved, and especially there is money going west to east to reach a deal on climate. So we have a Commission is proposing 50 or 55. We don't know yet even if they would even go. So there's part of a Commission that would prefer to go to 50. We believe that they will really show preference to the 55. then we will need to see if we can get some member states to support 65. Maybe we can start with Sweden, because the rapporteur for advocating for 65 is from Sweden. We also have calls that some political groups would propose 60. So let's see. And so the timetable is now we have tomorrow we have the European Council that will discuss the recovery package. We have next Monday, we have a EU-China meeting. So there's a 3 people will have a telephone call, and we assume that something comes with climate, but nothing major. This has been our hope. There was supposed to be a climate, big EU climate, EU-China summit in September, where we assumed and expected, and it was also supposed to, climate was supposed to play a really big role, and we thought this might have been the place where EU and China could come up together with the new updated NDCs before the Glasgow COP. But now everything is TBC, like you see. So we still have a couple of events that have not been cancelled, the European Councils, the EU-China summit from September, it was now postponed. We're still hoping that it would happen sometime between the US presidential elections and then end of the year, so that we would maybe have another chance here for the EU China to come with the new NDCs, also reflecting the results of the US elections, and the climate conference is now moved to 2021. Here's a little we try to keep very closely track which countries are supportive of at least 55, who are almost there, and who the countries that still need more convincing. So Luxembourg is very safely on the green side. So is my country, Finland, and we believe that Germany is also really going there. So if we have these green countries and the yellow countries, if together in the Environment Council they would vote for 55, this would be a qualified majority and we could have it there. But if we go for unanimity in the Heads of State Council, then we would also need this red chunk of countries. But there's the multi-annual financial framework, the just transition mechanism, etc., that will help these countries also to move to the greener end. So just then, this is extremely boring slide, but just to say that there was first some money that was really urgent recovery money that went mainly to cover unemployment benefits and for the health sector. So that money that came then very quickly after the crisis started was not particularly green. But now there is this 750 billion recovery finance that leaders are discussing tomorrow. Here we would really need it to be climate and environment focused, because these are crazy amounts of money, and if we are spending them now in the next 3-6 months, maybe 18 months maximum, but there's going to be, this is billions, but globally it is trillions. Member states will also do their own financing. This is just money that is circulated via EU. And if we spend all this money now wrongly, then we will not have any money to put for climate and environment in the next 10 years. That is really the crucial. The next 10 years are crucial in many ways, and that all the money we have to make this transition, that we thought we have 10 years time, kind of do little by little every year, we will have it. We will need to spend it now in next few months. So therefore, it's this is really very key. I was now rushing a bit to the end, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulriikka Aarnio from the Climate Action Network Europe. It was very helpful to have this overview. I am Nori Schneider from the Luxembourg Transition Platform, and usually we work with citizens on a local scale, but I'm also with Votum Klima, which is our Luxembourg-based NGO platform on climate policy issues. So I have a number of colleagues from the platform also with me here, and there are already in the chat a number of questions. Some would be more specific on climate policy, and then there are two questions on the coherence side. So Dietmar is asking on across all those strategies, how could they be organized in a coherent way? And then in the same line, a question from Eric. While we have these strategies on one hand, the governments are relaunching their car industry or any other kinds of recovery plans. How does that match together?
Dietmar, do you want to specify a bit what you mean? You are muted, Dietmar. Okay, you are still muted, so I will just.
So you listen.
Now.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the role of biofuels, for instance. Biofuels are causing many social and ecological problems, and but in the targets for renewables, they play an important role in Luxembourg, even stronger than on EU level. So my question is the coherence between all, for instance, if I take these examples, where is that decided? I have the impression there are so many commissions, and each commission is playing its own game to profile, to have a short profile, a strong profile, but I don't see is the coherence guaranteed inside the commission? Will it be decisions of the council? Where does it come from?
Yeah, I would agree with you, but I would also be a bit more hopeful now, because we have the net zero 2050 target enshrined in, well, soon enshrined in law, and also now endorsed by all countries. So this, when you start now unpacking this with the Green Deal and then the implementing legislation, and there is now an understanding that it cuts across all sectors, that every sector has an impact on climate and environment, and also is impacted by climate and environment. So I would be more hopeful. I would agree with you that this has been exactly like you say. But I would think that the page has turned, but it still, of course, needs a lot of work, and there are still, there's of course lots of sectors and industries that are wishing to go the other way, and probably there are still also DGs in the Commission who have not completely taken this. But I have a feeling that von der Leyen is there, and Timmermans, who is the executive vice president responsible for Green Deal, they do understand the bigger picture. So I hope so.
So you are very, very positive. That is good to hear. I would like to repeat Eric's question, because in the recovery plans, like supporting the car industry, or you name it, aviation companies and so on, so a big part of the recovery plans are still very fossil. So how can that go, and for how long? What do you think?
Yes, yeah, this is what the analysis say, that it's everyone is in principle supportive of green recovery, but then the money is still being directed wrongly. So it's a huge issue, and we need to work a lot in the next months. But there are also it wasn't, for example, in Germany now, they decided not to give money decided not to give like money to buy new cars, but instead they reduced the VAT so that more people can use them. And then there's only this support for buying electric vehicles. And then there are a lot of examples of countries, like, for example, in Brussels, we have a scheme that we get, if we sell our car, give up on the registration plates, we get an abonnement for the public transport for a year, and then some 500 euros to buy an electric bike, a voucher. And there are these kinds of schemes now in more and more countries. And in Germany, the car industry lobbied really very much against it. They say that if you only get this prime to buy electric cars, that doesn't help German car industry at all, because they don't have enough electric cars to sell. But still, it seemed that the German government, that has always gone with the car industry, they didn't now go with their favored position, but decided instead to only give it to the electric cars.
So on the defossilization plans, Michelle is asking, for instance, let's assume that in 10 years' time, we would try to be fossil-free, more or less. So if we would start to reduce now from January on, during 10 years, every year 10% of our fossil energies, oil, gas, and coal, and so on, how could that match the plans?
Yeah, I think it would be pretty close to being enough. So what you can do, and I've done, I didn't now show it, but I take the remaining carbon budget and I put it in the Excel sheet, and then I start from 40 gigatons, and then I try how many percentages do I need to annually reduce globally, of course, that I get to zero before it runs out. And of course, the faster you do in the beginning, the slower you eat your cake, the longer it lasts. So so I think you would need to reduce something like 13% per year as of starting this year to get to zero before the cake runs out. But you, of course, you have trees and you have oceans that also take in CO2, but that will never be able to cover for so the emissions need to go to zero, but we have the sinks also to help us on the way.
So we would basically need 2 pandemics every year to get us to the target.
Yeah.
Jean is asking, when we take 2050 as a neutrality target, how about banking on negative emissions? Maybe Jean, do you want to explain what you mean by this question?
Yeah, I understand that the IPCC targets integrate negative emissions, counting on technologies that have not really been tested, like capture of CO2 and so on. So when the Ursula von der Leyen's Commission speaks about climate neutrality, is that the same kind of net neutrality, or is it real neutrality?
No, it's net neutrality. So they plan to. So this includes the natural sinks, the biological sinks. It includes CCS, so taking from the pipe end. But I think, in my opinion, I now don't remember, but this is something I also would want to have a webinar with the Commission. Is also then direct air capture, and probably in their scenario they have then BECCS, that is then bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. So they do have both biological and technological, but I can't now tell you the numbers, but they are definitely there. and then I think there's even a plan to go net negative after 2050. But definitely the budget, just if you are going to only get for EU to get zero by 2050, then of course the budget is long gone if you don't want to go to minus.
As I know, my friend Dietmar Meckes always questions this, so that's why he's raising the hand very nervously and is asking about loopholes, Dietmar.
Yeah, I think the word net neutrality is a fake word. It should be gross neutrality, because neutrality means a balance between reduction and removals. And this is one of the many fake words that are used to create an illusion how we will manage the problem. No, we will be neutral. This word neutral is nonsense in my point of view, because it legitimizes the import of fossil carbon in our actual atmosphere, and you may dig it in a hole, or you may create 1 trillion trees. It stays in our atmosphere with a high risk, especially by carbon capture and storage. There will be an earthquake or something else, a flooding, and it will come back. This is, in my point of view, all this wording, balance and net and neutral, this is a seduction of population. Be quiet and work.
Yeah, but also, of course, I would agree with you that there's a problem with the net. I think many sectors and industries and probably also individuals think that they don't need to themselves. The sector doesn't really need to go to zero because we can benefit from the removals, that we can be the steel sector can think that we can be the ones that can benefit from the trees that are growing. But but even if we would have all the industry would be carbon neutral, all the housing would be carbon neutral, if we would still have humans and we would eat, there would always be some emissions from agriculture, for example, and even if there wasn't people, there would always be a tree falling and tree growing. So it would be kind of a net. But I agree with you that it can be distracting. So therefore, we also are focusing on the zero, and that everybody needs to get to zero.
Some NGOs are also questioning the agenda, which is still not really a paradigm shift, as we were discussing for many years. And some critiques say that, well, there's still this growth agenda. We don't talk about sufficiency yet, while planetary limits are overstretched partly, and most of the solutions are based on techno fixes. How can, what does Can Europe think about this critique?
So we of course would agree with the analysis that the policies for that we have on the table will be on the table in the coming years and months will not be compatible with the planetary limits, and we would also agree that the issue of compensation, the consumption is not addressed, and we have very few NGOs who are really working on the consumption and talking about the meat, for example, because that's one of the meat and dairy, for example, are good examples. But it seems that there seems to be a shift still, because individuals seem to start to understand the health and environmental benefits, but we are not working on that yet. But I think that we are looking for opportunities to do that. And then within the legislation, there is this farm to fork. The common agriculture policy has not been in any way successful for directing our consumption habits, nor making any use for biodiversity, so or emissions. So we're looking into now other elements, other legislation that will be on the table. But we of course we worked with the instruments that we have, but we are keen to look elsewhere as well.
And in the past year, there has been a huge movement with protests that the youth were leading, but also, at least in Luxembourg and in many other countries, there was real joining together also of NGOs, but labor unions and so on. We had in Luxembourg, the umbrella was called United for Climate Justice. So a very pressing question is, can this green agenda, is it compatible with social justice needs that are very pressing and that might be even more pressing with the COVID crisis now? What are the labor unions in Brussels saying about this agenda? Are there any exchanges? Is there any intelligence to still join plans between environmental NGOs and social organizations?
Yeah. At the CAN level, also with the CAN international level, we have been, especially in the last year, we have been doing a lot of outreach to other constituencies and to labor and to other movements, and where we see all these crises very interrelated, and we believe that we need to all come together to solve them. But of course, this is I can't give you. It's a process, and you know as well as I do how this is going so far. But we're very keen to reach out to others.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything you would like to tell us in terms of as Luxembourg is, for instance, or is there anything we can? I mean, there you have showed a slide on different governments have different positions. Elizabeth had a question on that. Who are the blockers? Luxembourg is not, while our climate track historically is quite bad, but there might be other blockers. Is there anything we can do from here?
Yeah, Luxembourg is you're doing well. You can join CAN Europe and join our forces. We work together with them to move also the blockers. But I think that also you can talk to your governments about how to move Poland and friends.
Mm-hmm. Dietmar has
Yeah.
another question still.
No.
Just one thing. There's also today came out a really interesting letter from the Visegrad countries, mayors of their capitals, supportive of the green recovery and 55%. So, for example, these kinds of things for doing cities joint things and other sectors joint initiatives can also help. So there might be other ways to reach out to these countries than just through governments.
Okay, thank you very much. Dietmar.
Yeah, nice to hear that Luxembourg is very supportive and steadily supportive. I wouldn't be so sure about that.
Yeah.
Yes, because when the target was 40, also we as the network Votum Klima appreciated very much that Luxembourg set in his climate and energy plan now 55. So, but when on the European level it's 55, for Luxembourg it must be something like 65.
Yeah.
because the rich countries have to do more, and so put them in the middle
Okay.
column. And we have also to do our homework here, because parts of the government will never accept more than 55. They will say, what do you want? Just 3 weeks ago, the government voted for the climate and energy plan. It was 28th of May. And
Yeah.
now again, you want more? What is that? So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then,
no, there's still work.
yeah, there's still work. And view from Brussels, Luxembourg looks nice.
Luxembourg looks really good, yeah.
Yeah,
So
keep that illusion, you are happy.
So I would like, the sun is out at least in Luxembourg. Those sessions on Zoom get difficult when we run more than an hour. So
yeah.
I would suggest that we close for now. I thank you very much, Ulriikka, for sharing
Very
with
nice
us
to talk to
the
you.
bigger picture